we're going to kick off the list with the legend of the Hookman. Now, supposedly on Pond Run Road in the village of New Richmond, there once lived a doctor and his wife. They had a son who was mentally disturbed, and these two were ashamed of him and opted to keep him out of the public eye. This meant chaining him up in the basement whenever people were over, or when they just didn't want him in their presence. One night, there was a terrible storm. A bolt of lightning hit their house and a fire started. When authorities arrived on the scene, they found the parents burnt to death, which was the perfect outcome for despicable people like that. But the boy, who had been chained up in the basement at the time, was nowhere to be found, aside from his hand, still chained up to the wall in the basement. So where did he go? Well, legends started to spread that over the years he grew up stalking through the woods, stealing from homes nearby, brandishing a hook for a hand, and brutalizing innocent people, especially young couples. The urban legend of the Hookman is one you see all over the place. This is just Ohio's specific version of the tale. If you're liking our channel so far, by the way, if you're new here, why not hit that subscribe button? You got nothing to lose. It's free. We got awesome videos coming at you on the daily. All right, next on the list we have Munchkin Land. This urban legend of Munchkin Land, also known as Tiny Town in Cincinnati, Ohio, centers around a peculiar area near Rumpke Landfill. Here, a cluster of small houses and buildings allegedly housed a community of little people. According to local lore, these tiny inhabitants were notorious for hurling rocks at passing cars, attempting to deter any intruders. Numerous tales circulated about unsuspecting individuals who stopped their cars in the vicinity, only to find themselves confronted by enraged little folk armed with rocks and ready to defend their territory. As to where these little people are said to have come from, the legend goes that they were retired circus performers. Now, there actually was a collection of small structures in this area. They've recently been torn down, I believe. But as to why they were there are lots of different stories, including, of course, that they were built by the little retired circus performers. A more likely explanation, though, is that they had been built by a farmer on the land who had decided he wanted to start running hay rides, and that he, built the houses on the property. But I think it's still a bit murky as to how they got there. Number 8, the Peninsula Python. So this incident involved the discovery of a large python in the Cuyahoga Valley National Park in Peninsula, Ohio in the summer of 1944. The question obviously was, how did this python, native to tropical regions, end up in a park in Ohio? For a while, authorities didn't even think the reports were real, or at least they didn't think people were really seeing what they thought they were seeing. A massive snake stalking the area became something of an urban legend at the time, but turns out that there indeed was a python, and as to how it got there, some believed that it had been a pet released by its owner, others speculated it had escaped from a traveling circus or a private exotic animal collection. It's still a bit of a mystery to this day as to how it really got there. The python was never even found. It likely died during the winter, but some say it's still stalking its way out there. At number 7, we have Gore Orphanage. Light of Hope Orphanage was established in 1902. It was run by a religious zealot. One day the building caught fire, and the young ones inside all perished in the flames, the cries for help being unheard. The question was, how did the fire start? Well, some say it was an accident, maybe one of the orphans dropped a lamp, but then there's the legend of Old Man Gore, the cruel, sadistic man who ran the facility. In reality, the man's name was Johann Sprunger. He ran the orphanage with his wife, Katerina. It was actually a former orphanage they ran that caught on fire. It was true that they were cruel, though. Orphans attempted escaping from the institution on a number of occasions. There was also a fire in an elementary school in the nearby town of Collinwood, where 176 young people died. So most likely these two real-life incidents were combined and kind of formed this urban legend that is Gore Orphanage. Next on the list, we have the disappearance of Brian Schaefer. In 2006, Brian Schaefer, a medical student at Ohio State University, completely vanished. On the night of March 31st, Schaefer went out with friends to the Ugly Tuna Saloona, a bar near the campus in Columbus. Surveillance footage captured him entering the bar, but never showed him actually leaving. When his friends realized he was missing, they figured he'd gone home, but he hadn't. And surveillance footage from the bar showed footage of Brian speaking with two women outside the bar just before 2 a.m. His friends had already left at this point. Then he went back inside and that was it. No trace of him after that. And here's the thing, the bar only had one entrance, monitored by surveillance cameras, which didn't record Brian leaving. On top of that, there were no signs of foul play in his apartment. Over the years, there's been lots of speculation as to what happened here, but one theory is that he voluntarily disappeared and is alive, hopefully anyway, living with a new identity. At our number 5 spot, we have Amy. On Lick Road, just outside of Cincinnati, a terrible incident is said to have taken place. A woman named Amy lost her life at the hands of someone, but the perpetrator was never found. The prevailing theory is that her boyfriend did it, though. As the years passed, tales of Amy's ghost haunting Lick Road began to spread, making the ghost of Amy one of the most prominent urban legends in Ohio. Supposedly, there are a couple ways to experience the ghost of Amy. One legend goes that if you flick your headlights onto the sign as you're turning on to Lick Road at night, you can see the name Amy briefly flash on the sign. Another goes that if you park your car at the cul-de-sac facing the woods, then flash your headlights 3 times, your windows will start to fog up with the word help being written in the condensation. Some nightly visitors have claimed to see the ghostly figure of Amy standing at the edge of the forest. Others claim to hear disembodied footsteps behind them as they make their way across the bridge. Next up, we have Satan's Hollow. In Cincinnati, there is a famous drainage tunnel, a tunnel with a very dark history. Strange and ominous things are said to have happened there. Satanic rituals and disappearances supposedly plague the tunnel, and one story goes that during one of these rituals, a portal to the underworld was accidentally opened. This has led to a number of locals believing this series of interconnected tunnels are actually a portal to hell itself now. People claim to hear strange noises coming from its depths and have even witnessed a shadowy figure known as the Shadow Man, a demonic entity who stalks the tunnel at night. The Werewolf of Defiance. So in the summer of 1972, the small town of Defiance, Ohio was rocked by a series of bizarre and terrifying encounters with what locals would describe as the Werewolf of Defiance. First reported sighting occurred when 2 railroad workers, Ted Davis and Tom Jones, were laboring on the Norfolk and Western Railway. Ted Davis, busy with his work, suddenly looked up to witness something completely unexplainable. A large wolf-like creature clutching a wooden board in its paws. The creature then just whacked Ted on the shoulder with the board before vanishing into the nearby bushes. I like the imagery of that. Just a werewolf come walking out. Bam! All right, goodbye. Anyway, 5 days later, Ted and Tom returned to work, hoping that the strange encounter was just a one-time event. But unfortunately, they spotted this pesky werewolf again. Luckily, it was much further away this time, and they just booked it out of there. They reported the incident to the local police, and before long, this wave of similar reports flooded in from various parts of Defiance. More and more residents claimed to have encountered a wolf-man-like creature. People were scared to go outside. Like, nobody wants to be gored by a massive-sized wolf person. The sightings, did trail off, but the Wolfman of Defiance has remained a legend of Ohio ever since. And at second place, we have the Crosswick Monster. This incident took place in 1982 and has become a prominent tale in Ohio's cryptid folklore. According to this story, 2 young boys, Ed and Joe Lynch, encountered a terrifying creature in a field. They heard peculiar noises coming from the tall grass, and before they could react, a massive 4-legged lizard-like beast emerged. The creature swiftly approached them, grabbing 13-year-old Ed in its jaws, and began dragging him towards a hollowed-out tree. Fortunately, though, the boys' screams caught the attention of 3 nearby men who rushed in to help. They managed to rescue Ed, but he sustained some pretty severe injuries. In response to this initial attack, a group of 60 men armed themselves with axes and clubs, and I'm imagining torches, and they formed a posse to hunt down this creature. They managed to catch up with it, and at one point it stood up on its hind legs. The chase led them to a hill of rocks where the creature vanished into a hole, never to be seen again. The story was written up in the local paper at the time, and it's since grown to be a staple of Ohio's folklore. Just what the hell was the thing that they saw that day? And finally, at a number 1 spot, we have the Circleville Writer. The Circleville letters case, which began in 1976 in Circleville, Ohio. Is it Circleville or Solville? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, it's still one of the most perplexing unsolved mysteries in the state. It all began with these anonymous, threatening letters sent to numerous residents. The letters contain detailed, personal information about the recipients' lives, leading to this fear and paranoia throughout the community. The mysterious writer knew intimate details about the victims' private lives and warned them to cease certain behaviors. One of the primary recipients, Mary Gillespie, was particularly targeted. The sender claimed she had been having an affair, which Mary insisted was not true, and the situation escalated when Mary's husband, Ron Gillespie, received a letter warning him that he would be unalived. The case took a tragic turn when Ron Gillespie was found dead in his crashed car. His death was ruled an accident, but many suspected foul play. The letters persisted even after Ron's death, leaving the town baffled about the identity of the sender. Several theories emerged, including suspicions about a local school superintendent and Mary's brother-in-law, but no conclusive evidence was ever found, leaving the case unsolved. This incident has inspired numerous legends and conspiracy theories. Stories have spread about the letters having been written by some sort of vengeful ghost or spirit haunting the town, even.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Barbara Colby. It was July 24th, 1975, and Barbara Colby, a talented American actor, and her colleague James Kiernan had just wrapped up an acting class in Venice, California. As they strolled towards their car in a dimly lit parking area, an unimaginable tragedy unfolded. Out of nowhere, shots rang out, shattering the peaceful evening. Barbara Colby's life was instantly extinguished, leaving a void in the entertainment world. James Kiernan, miraculously clinging to life, summoned the strength to share vital information with the authorities. He described the assailants, though he couldn't place a name to their faces. The chilling reality dawned upon everyone that the attack had occurred without warning, motivation, or any discernible cause. Puzzled investigators meticulously analyzed the scene, hoping to uncover a motive or a potential robbery gone awry. However, they found no evidence of an attempted theft, leading them to a startling conclusion. This was a random act of violence, a merciless drive-by shooting. As the days turned into months and years, the elusive killers managed to evade justice, their identities shrouded in darkness. Decades have passed since that fateful night, yet the case remains hauntingly unsolved. The memory of Barbara Colby, as well as many unanswered questions, remain. In our number 9 spot today, we have Brian Jones. Brian, a founding member of the iconic rock band The Rolling Stones, met a very mysterious and untimely demise. On July 3rd, 1969, Jones was found lifeless at the bottom of his swimming pool at his home in Sussex, England. The official cause of death was recorded as drowning due to misadventure, but suspicions and unanswered questions have persisted. Controversies surround the circumstances leading up to Jones' death. Some believe that his passing was a tragic accident, possibly caused by ingesting illicit substances or a combination of substances, impairing his judgment while swimming. However, conspiracy theories suggest foul play and the involvement of others. The true events leading to Brian Jones' demise remain elusive. The unresolved mystery surrounding his death has fueled ongoing speculation, with some calling for a reopening of the case to uncover the truth behind his tragic end. In our number 8 spot today, we have Jill Dando. Jill was an English journalist and a television presenter until she was killed outside of her southwest London home in 1999. This created the biggest manhunt the country had seen since the Yorkshire Ripper in the 70s. A man named Barry George was originally convicted and sentenced to prison for this terrible crime, but he ended up actually being acquitted years later, which now leaves this case unsolved. Jill's next door neighbor heard a surprised gasp from Jill, but he never heard a shot and said it sounded more like someone who was greeting an old friend. The same neighbor looked out of the window and actually saw whoever the killer is, but of course at the time didn't know who he was or what had just happened, and he didn't recognize the man, so he was unable to give an identification. There are tons of speculations and rumors about who took Jill's life, and it ranges from a potential stalker to maybe even a hit job. Hopefully one day there will be answers on why someone would have done something so horrible to to Jill. In our number 7 spot today we have Richie Edwards. Richie Edwards was a prominent member of the Welsh rock band Manic Street Preachers, and he mysteriously vanished without a trace on February 1st, 1995. In a very perplexing turn of events, Edwards checked out of his London hotel and seemingly vanished from the public eye. Despite exhaustive searches, thorough investigations, and a dedicated effort to uncover the truth, no concrete evidence or clues pertaining to his whereabouts have ever been discovered. The enigma surrounding Edwards' disappearance has sparked a plethora of theories and speculations. Some believe he may have taken his own life, pointing to his history of depression and self-destructive behavior. Others suggest the possibility of a voluntary disappearance fueled by his desire to escape the pressures of fame and public scrutiny, and astonishingly, there are even those who entertain the notion that Edwards may still be alive, living a reclusive existence away from the spotlight. While the world of music mourns the loss of an exceptional talent, the true fate of Richie Edwards remains shrouded in uncertainty. In our number 6 spot today we have Bob Crane. On June 29th, 1978, the world was stunned when Bob Crane, a beloved actor renowned for his portrayal of Colonel Hogan in the TV series Hogan's Heroes, was tragically discovered bludgeoned to death in his apartment in Scottsdale, Arizona. The gruesome nature of his killing sent shockwaves through the entertainment industry and beyond. A suspect was eventually brought to trial, yet the outcome proved inconclusive. Despite the legal proceedings, the case remains unsolved, leaving a cloud of uncertainty hanging over the circumstances of Crane's killing and the identity of his killer. The enigma surrounding this high-profile crime has fueled intense debates and ongoing investigations. Numerous theories have emerged over the years, speculating on potential motives and potential culprits. Some believe that the motive was rooted in personal conflicts, while others suspect a connection to Crane's private life given his involvement in a highly publicized and controversial sex scandal. Yet the truth remains elusive, and the killing of Bob Crane remains a haunting mystery. In our number 5 spot today we have Jack Nance. Jack Nance was an actor best known for the series Twin Peaks, and on December 29th, 1996, Jack had lunch with a couple of friends and they noticed he had a bruise under his eye. When they asked him about how he got it, he just said he got into it with someone outside of a donut shop and that he guessed he got what he deserved. Jack left the lunch complaining of a headache, and the next day he was found passed away in his home. It turns out his injuries had caused a subdural hematoma, which was his cause of death. This would mean whoever he got into a fight with, whether it was an accident or not, was the one who caused his death and should most certainly have to pay some kind of price for that, but no one knows who this person is or was. It really does make you wonder if this person knew who they had punched, and if they knew that they caused his death, you really hope that if they did, they would have come forward. In our number 4 spot today we have Thelma Todd. Thelma Todd was a wonderful comedic actor and well-respected woman, and on Monday, December 16th, 1935, Thelma was unfortunately found after she had passed away in her car. The circumstances surrounding her death have always baffled people. It is said that after leaving a dinner with friends, Thelma returned to her home, but she had been locked out, so she headed toward the home of Jewel Cartman, who was the former wife of Thelma's lover, Ronald West. When Thelma arrived there, it is speculated that she went down to the garage and got in the car, presumably to warm up. The death was eventually ruled accidental and the cause was carbon monoxide poisoning, but people just could not accept that answer. The night before Thelma was found, she was at a dinner party with friends, and the autopsy report showed the contents of her stomach were not things that they had been served at the dinner, which leaves the question, where did she go that night that has not been accounted for? Some people think she may have taken her own life, but people close to her say that they believe that it is highly unlikely. Some people accept that it may have been accidental, but some people believe some sort of foul play was involved. In our number 3 spot today we have Dorothy Arnold. On December 12th, 1910, Dorothy vanished under perplexing circumstances that continue to baffle investigators to this day. The last known sighting of Dorothy Arnold occurred as she strolled along the bustling 5th Avenue in New York City. Despite exhaustive searches, extensive media attention, and a relentless pursuit for answers, no trace of her has ever been uncovered. Her disappearance, full of mystery, has left behind a void of unanswered questions that echo through the decades. Numerous theories have emerged over time, ranging from theories of voluntary disappearance to more sinister possibilities. Was it an unfortunate accident? Did she choose to start a new life far from the spotlight of her affluent upbringing? Or did a darker fate befall her? At this point, point in time, what exactly happened is totally unclear, and the truth is, we might never know for sure. In our number 2 spot today, we have Bruce Lee. The world was left in shock on July 20th, 1973, when Bruce Lee, the iconic martial artist and actor, passed away unexpectedly at the very young age of 32. The cause of his untimely demise, attributed to cerebral edema, sparked a flurry of speculation and enduring theories that continue to captivate enthusiasts and fans to this day. Numerous hypotheses have emerged, each offering a different perspective on the circumstances surrounding Lee's tragic death. Some proponents of foul play suggest hidden motives behind his demise, pointing to potential enemies or conspiracies within the entertainment industry. On the other hand, another school of thought suggests that Lee's demise was an unfortunate result of an adverse reaction to medication. Despite extensive investigations and medical examinations, the exact cause of Bruce Lee's death remains a subject of debate and ambiguity. The elusiveness of the truth adds an air of mystery and intrigue to his already legendary status, leaving admirers to ponder the final moments of the martial arts legend and mourn the loss of a remarkable talent that was taken far too soon. And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have Virginia Rappe. Virginia was a model and silent film actor before her passing in 1921. On September 5th of that year, she went to a party at Roscoe Arbuckle Suite at the St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco. There are many accounts of what exactly happened this night, but none match up exactly, so what really happened is still quite unclear. Virginia suffered some sort of trauma at this party and was taken to the hospital, where she passed away on the 9th due to a ruptured bladder and the subsequent infection in the wall of her abdomen due to that. There are 2 main possibilities for what happened to Virginia that night at the party. The first theory is that some underlying health conditions she had, such as a UTI or STI, mixed with the consuming of alcohol, may have caused this. I am certainly not a doctor, so I'm not sure how possible or likely this is, but it is one of the main speculations. The other one, which many people insist is what actually happened, is that her injuries were caused by a violent attack on her by Roscoe. This was first claimed by the person who went to the party with Virginia, but they were often discredited due to their record of extortion and blackmail. Roscoe went through 3 trials, but was ultimately acquitted for the crime. Even though this happened a full century ago, many people still debate what may have happened to Virginia that night, and unfortunately, we may never know.
Starting off this countdown, we have A858. In 2011, a Reddit user posted a strange and indecipherable code to the subreddit R A858DE45F516-9BC9. Very long, so people refer to it as A858 for short. On the subreddit, this user would post puzzles and cryptic messages. It gained a lot of traction and people were desperately trying to crack these puzzles. No one has been successful to this day. Things got strange when the original poster disappeared for 4 years. When they came back in 2015, that's when he began dropping subtle hints, including a message that when decoded, it revealed an image of Stonehenge. Sadly, in 2016, the page became private, and I believe that it still is private. In our 9th spot, we have Pis Enigma. This is an unsolved puzzle or riddle that was posted on the internet by a user named Publius. Basically, they said that there was a message hidden in the 1994 Pink Floyd album, Division Bell. Many people have tried to solve this puzzle, but none have been successful. It was said though that whoever solved the riddle would be given a reward. Now, the band denied any association with this riddle, and if that's the case, who's behind it? How do you solve it? And what is the reward? In our 8th spot, we have Gary McKinnon. In 2002, Gary McKinnon was determined to figure out if aliens were real. He spent hours researching them and trying to figure out what NASA was hiding. That's when he decided to hack into NASA to see what he could find. In the end, he discovered an image of some sort of strange flying aircraft in the sky. When NASA noticed that an outsider had obtained this information, his access was shut off. Of course, NASA has always denied Gary's claims on the UFO photos that he saw. In the end, Gary was let off the hook, but to this day, we don't know if what he saw was real or if he made it up or what. In our 7th spot, we have Unfavorable Semicircle. This is said to be YouTube's strangest mystery. It started in March of 2015 when a YouTube account with the title Unfavorable Semicircle was created. From there, they started to post weird cryptic videos videos, all titled with the Sagittarius symbol and then random numbers. The videos were often of abstract, pixelated images. Some videos were accompanied with weird and distorted sounds. In fact, in some of the videos, you can hear a muffled male voice breathing or reciting random letters or numbers. This channel posted thousands of these weird, cryptic videos. To this day, nobody knows what the videos mean or who's behind them. Now here's where it gets weird. A bunch of Reddit users became determined to solve this mystery. From there, the channel gained a lot of attention. But as soon as this happened, YouTube suspended the account without explanation. The videos are basically lost forever. All that's left are bad screen recordings of them. Moving on to number 6, we have the Plague Doctor video. This is another very famous video on YouTube. The video features a person dressed in a Plague Doctor mask doing a bunch of weird stuff in a rundown building. Now, the video title was in binary code. When translated, it spelt out death in Spanish. How creepy is that? Not only that, but the video is filled with an awful buzzing sound. And apparently, if you put this buzzing sound into a spectrogram, which basically gives you a visual representation of the sound, it apparently makes the shape of a woman who's being harmed. To this day, no one knows what's up with this video, or who's behind it, or what it means. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Are Creepy. Now this is another part to that creepy Plague Doctor video. So when that video became viral, the subreddit Are Creepy became devoted to solving this mystery. However, along the way, some mysterious people started posting weird messages in the forum. One was a Morse code message that when translated said, "Red lips, life 10th." Don't know what that means at all. And then they also posted 2015 there will be 3. Again, no one knows what this means. Other messages included a list of chess moves, the coordinates to the White House, and coded disturbing images depicting violence against women. To this day, no one has been able to solve this mystery or find out who's behind all these posts. In our 4th spot, we have the deep web. The term deep web refers to the 80% of the internet that is inaccessible through normal internet browsers. And there's a reason why. The stuff on the deep web can be traumatizing. One person stumbled upon an online bid. When the bidding ended, it was revealed that they were bidding on a woman who was tied to a chair. The winning bidder could type what they wanted to do to her. Turns out that this was a torture murder live stream. Moving on to number 3, we have Mariana Mortegard Glesgorf. Excuse me, I know I just butchered that name. But this is apparently one of the scariest and most haunted videos on the internet. This video was posted on YouTube in 2008 and immediately unsettled everyone who watched it. It starts off with some man just staring into the camera, then out of nowhere, he starts laughing maniacally. In the next section of the video, we see a man with weird, creepy eyeballs. Now, the full video is 2 minutes long. However, you are warned never to watch the full video. It is said that if you do, it'll drive you insane. In fact, the entire video was apparently removed off of YouTube after 100 people took out their own eyeballs after watching this video and then mailed them to YouTube's main office in San Bruno. To this day, we don't know who created this video, why, and who's that man in the video. In our 2nd spot, we have the killer. A number of killers have apparently used forum sites like 4chan to ask some pretty disturbing questions and tease others. On 4chan, one person discovered a post where someone asked what they keep in their freezer. This person replied with a picture of dead body parts in their freezer. Another killer decided to play a little game with some people on 4chan. He said that there was a missing person, and if they guessed who it was correctly, then they would give them a freebie and then coordinates to where her body was buried. And I don't know if she was ever found. And in our number 1 spot today, we have How to Be a Serial Killer. Now, this is the name of a website, thankfully no longer active, that used to teach people how to become a serial killer. The site was full with detailed explanations on how to kill people and get away with it. Eventually, the site was removed, but when you searched for it, a message popped up saying, "How to be a serial killer has been removed. If you're really interested in killing someone, why don't you start with yourself?" Excuse me? No. Okay, sorry. We still need to know who created this site and why.
Number 10, H.H. Holmes. I had a feeling that if I didn't include him at least once, somebody would be like, "You're wrong!" So here he is. Ah yes, the genius inspired by Sherlock Holmes himself, though he ended up being the villain of the story and far from the hero. Henry Howard Holmes was indeed a genius. He skipped a ton of grades, finished school at just 16, and gained a doctorate of medicine at just 23. What was I doing at 23? I was in acting school. But he had a desire for the dark side he just could not shake. His interest in medicine began with practicing on animals. In medical school, he was already dabbling in darkness when he started conning insurance claims and stealing corpses. But for Holmes, everything was building towards his one goal in life, the construction of the murder castle. By 1800 Chicago, Holmes eventually earned enough money to construct a massive labyrinth within a hotel of sorts. It had stores on the bottom and apartments above, each level booby trap with trapdoors, mazes, and chutes that would drop his victims into a basement with like vats of acid and crematoriums where it was just like nuts. Historians still debate how many people he killed, but they're thinking around 200. Wish they caught him before this happened, but alas, here he is on this list. Number 9, Andrew Cunanan, the man who shot Gianni Versace. Andrew had an IQ of 147, memorized a whole set of encyclopedias by the time he was 10 years old, and by the time he was 21, he could speak 7 languages. So where did it go wrong? There is no clear reason, but whatever it was, Andrew loved to lie about it. He was a prolific liar and made large claims about his family's origins, to the delight of the rich older men who indulged him. He craved a lavish, carefree lifestyle, which rich millionaire Norman Blanchard gave him until he had enough sense to throw him out. This was a massive blow to Andrew's ego, and this led to a downward spiral which claimed the lives of 5 people. His ex-best friend Jeffrey Trail, his former lover David Madsen, Lee Miglin, William Reese, and then lastly Gianni Versace on July 15th, 1997. There are a lot of missing pieces in this case. Due to Andrew's disillusionment and the passion for lying, no one really knows why these murders happened, or even if he really knew Gianni before he shot him. By the time authorities caught up with him, Andrew had taken his own life, and there was no note left behind. So whatever the reason for his killing spree, perhaps even Andrew didn't even know the truth by the end. Number 8, John Christie. John Christie had so much potential, with an IQ of 128, and he was incredibly gifted in mathematics. Who knows what good he could have done for the world, but during the 1940s to the 1950s, Christie stole the lives of 8 women including his wife, and how he did it is stomach churning. He preyed on the desperate lives of women seeking help and posed as a backstreet abortionist. He would first knock them out with gas, but they would never wake up. When they passed out, he strangled them before or after doing other unmentionable things to them. He stashed the bodies underneath the floorboards, in the garden, or in the kitchen alcove. These horrors took place at 10 Rillington, Notting Hill, London, and the house has since been demolished. But one of the most awful things he did was frame the husband of a family who moved in above him. Christie killed his wife and their daughter, and then set the husband up as the killer. The man, Timothy Evans, was forced into giving a false confession and was hung, and it was this miscarriage of justice that led to the suspension of capital punishment. Number 7, Lawrence Bittaker, aka the Toolbox Killer. Like many others on this list, a lot of potential to do good here, especially with an IQ of 138. But as this list kind of proves, just because your IQ sets high expectations doesn't mean you'll meet them. Bittaker was a high school dropout and turned to a life of crime early on. Bittaker, along with his accomplice Roy Norris, drove around in a blacked out van called the Murder Mac. The two met while serving a sentence at the California Men's Colony in San Luis Obispo after both had developed a liking for crime. Somehow the two made parole, and for 3 months in 1979, they did awful things to 5 women using hand tools. What they did to those poor women inside their van is enough to churn the bile in your stomach, so I won't go into much detail. A psychologist's analysis of Bittaker was that he was borderline psychotic. And Norris had a severe schizoid personality. The two were finally caught, with Norris receiving life in prison, and Bittaker died on death row at the age of 79. Number 6, Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer. We all know he was gonna be on this. I want to be clear about something. Having a high IQ is dependent on a lot of things. Education, nutrition, environment, etc. It doesn't necessarily mean you're dumb or smart, or that you won't or will be successful. Somehow, the same man who drilled holes into humans' heads to turn them into zombies had an IQ of 145, so put that together. Dahmer became known as the Milwaukee Cannibal and is one of the most prolific serial killers to ever exist. He became fixated on animals at a young age. We know what happens after that, right? In 1978, Dahmer dropped out of business school due to alcohol abuse after just 3 months. He enlisted in the US Army to train as a medical specialist, but that didn't last long. He was discharged after he attacked 2 fellow soldiers. After that, Dahmer's mental health deteriorated even further, and he fell hard into alcoholism and began his killing spree. After one of his victims escaped and notified the police, when they got there, the chief medical examiner remarked, and I quote, "It was more like dismantling someone's museum than an actual crime scene." Between 1971 and 1999, he killed 17 men in a variety of gruesome ways and celebrated each one with like trophies. Dahmer was killed behind bars by another inmate in 1994, and that is the end of his story. Number 5. Marcel P. As if the war crimes of World War II weren't bad enough, Marcel P. had to add his villainy to the list. Marcel's life started out pretty rough, and due to his addiction to thievery was committed to an asylum. But instead of going to the asylum, he ended up earning his medical degree while interning. Sadly, he didn't use his intellect for good. Instead, he made an already horrific time even worse. Many Jewish people were trying to escape Europe for obvious reasons, and Marcel made sure many did not. He would tell his victims that he had a way out, a route to escape occupied France beneath the eyes of the German army. He claimed he was a part of the French resistance, gathering trust from many desperate souls, but when they fell prey to his plan, he would inject them quickly with cyanide and steal all of their valuables. Luckily, he was eventually captured and executed at the end of the war in 1946, but by then the damage had been done. Number 4. Ed Kemp. Funnily enough, I think this is only the second time I've actually mentioned Ed Kemper in a video, which is very surprising because he's Ed Kemp. Ed's strange talent for making people believe he was a gentle giant, all while committing 10 of the most gruesome crimes astounds me. With an IQ of 145, he easily manipulated his victims into trusting him before it was the last thing they ever did. Standing at 6'9" and weighing 250 pounds, he used both brawn and brains to overpower the women he killed. He showed obvious signs of a pathological need to kill from a young age, starting with the family cat all the way to killing his paternal grandparents at age 15. Even then, he was able to convince mental health professionals to let him go early because he was fine. Wow. From 1972 to 1973, Ed used the line, "I don't have all day," to convince hitchhikers to enter his car, implying he was in a rush, put pressure on them, and convinced them that he didn't have time to kill them. They also never caught him. He turned himself in. If you're still with us right now, remember to like and subscribe, and remember to head on over to Bumblebee to show some love as well. Number 3. Mao Zedong. It surprises me to no end that while I was in high school, we spent all of our time learning about Rudolf Mittler, but this guy totally slipped under the radar. I know the phrase "pick your battles" exists, but did no one think to pick this fight? Am I missing something? Let me know in the comments. Admittedly, the world probably couldn't handle it after the 85 million people who were lost in World War II, but from 1966 to 1976, Mao Zedong killed over 65 million of his own people in a vicious attempt to establish socialism. From mass starvation to burying 46,000 scholars alive, to flat out killing anyone who got in his way, he was vicious, brutal, and inhumane. His disastrous policies and revisions led to 50% of most villages dying from starvation. As his plans continued to fail, he developed the Red Army, a force composed of girls and boys from the ages 14 to 21 to roam cities and target enemies of the state, especially their teachers. Educated people, after all, are the biggest threat to poor leadership. They whisper ideas. So he would make them wear dunce hats, cover their faces with ink, and make them crawl on all fours and bark like dogs. Let's also not forget his expanded system of 1,000 forced labor camps. Need I say more? Number 2. Shiro Ishi. Talk about Dr. Evil. During World War II, Japanese prisoner of war camps were worse than hell could ever be on Earth. One of the reasons why was because of Dr. Shiro Ishi. He excelled in school and was even called a genius time and time and again. However, instead of using his mind for good, he became a monster. Shiro Ishi was the director of Unit 731 in the Department of Biological Weapons for the Imperial Japanese Army. Ishi dedicated most of his life to understanding the deadliest kinds of science, from disease warfare and inhumane experiments. He did it all to help Japan become the leader of the world. He would perform horrendous experiments on prisoners of war in their encampments, infecting them with diseases and testing out biological weapons on them. His unit even performed live vivisections on prisoners, inflicting them with hypothermia, frostbite, induced strokes, and heart attacks. He was never punished for his crimes, and ended up avoiding prosecution for his crimes by turning his experiments over to the US. That's how he got out of it. They were like, you know what? We won't punish you if you give us the results. Number 1, Joseph Stalin. Need I say more? Need I really say more? Now, the world was just reeling from battling dollar store Charlie Chaplin for 5 years, who definitely was a man who needed to be stopped. But Stalin's forces did start out as an Axis power in World War II, but they eventually turned to our side and helped us out a great deal. But that doesn't, or shouldn't, diminish the fact that during his 30-year reign, he was responsible for the deaths of over 60 million people, 20 million of them being his own. That means he killed roughly 40,000 people per week during his reign. The closest we came to war with Stalin was the Cold War, a nuclear standoff between the US. His place on this list is a little controversial. After all, his dedication as a leader is one of the reasons Mustache Man bit the dust and World War II ended. But due to his murderous tendencies and paranoia, those in the grip of his iron fist would describe him as both a powerful leader, a genius, and a monster.
Starting us off at number 10, we have Giovani Alini. Alini is one of the many scientists who is actually the inspiration for the infamous Mary Shelley novel, Frankenstein. Alini was a 19th century physicist obsessed with the effects of electrocution. Who isn't, am I right? Anyway, he was a bit of a celebrity and he was known to travel throughout Europe demonstrating the powers of electricity. What makes this guy evil though? Well, he was one of the first scientists to use electrical shocks on mental patients. He also enjoyed electrocuting corpses. One of his most famous acts involved him displaying a body of a hanged criminal and then shocking the body to then make the muscles contract and spasm as if the deceased was still alive. I get it. Electricity is cool, but how about a little respect for the dead? Alini was also highly respected at the time. The Emperor of Austria even made him a Knight of the Iron Crown. Ooh, sounds evil, doesn't it? At number 9, we have Hwang Wook. Hwang is famously known for his work creating human stem cell lines using cloned embryos from patients suffering from spinal cord injury. This major accomplishment promised an endless supply of stem cells genetically matched to patients, but it turned out to be all lies. Hwang admitted in 2006 that he was indeed falsifying data, but still claiming that he had the ability to do what he was lying about all along. The court found Hwang guilty of buying human eggs in violation of the country's bioethics laws and embezzling 830 million won, which is equivalent to $700,000 of government money. He was sentenced to 2 years in a Korean prison. He received such a light sentence because the judge admired Hwang's dedication to Korean biotechnology. Many other Korean scientists in the community are not ready to welcome him back though, after embezzling so much money on what is supposed to be a great and worthy cause. One Korean researcher states that it is truly tragic because he is clearly one talented experimentalist. Yeah, that's a lot of money. Pretty hard to just trust someone with government and public money after a stunt like that, but hey, I hope there's some scientific breakthrough soon. At number 8, we have Jose Delgado. Back in the 1960s at Yale University, Professor Jose Delgado was working on some pretty scary stuff. Delgado invented one of the first ever brain chips. He was known to use these chips in bulls, monkeys, and humans. It is reported that he once stopped a charging bull in its tracks after pressing a button that activated the small chip inside the animal's head. With the touch of a button, these radio waves could make these animals snarl, growl, smile, invoke lust, hunger, and many more responses. Delgado recently described himself as a libertarian and pacifist whose goal as a scientist was to liberate us from our biology and especially mental illnesses and aggression. I don't know about that. It sounds a lot more to me like he was trying to take over the world with some pretty crazy mind control chips, but he was also known to test on mental patients. Whether this one is with good intentions or not, this one freaks the hell out of me. At number 7, we have Albert Bandura. Bandura is a famous psychologist who, interestingly enough, just passed away days ago in California. He is famous for being one of the first scientists to discover that learning occurs both through beliefs and through social modeling, which then led to the social cognitive theory. One of his most famous experiments he ever conducted was back in 1961 and was titled the Bobo Doll Experiment. In this experiment, Bandura hired researchers to physically and verbally abuse a clown-faced inflatable toy in front of many preschool-aged children. Which, when the adult researchers left and the children were left alone with the already beat-up doll, the children took on the attitudes of the adults and began yelling and beating up the doll as well. This was later to prove the theory that children were indeed influenced by the violence in media and helped prove his later social cognitive theory. The theory that a person's environment, cognition, and behavior all interact to determine how that person functions, as opposed to one of those factors playing a dominant role. Teaching kids to be future bullies in the schoolyard? Pure monkey see evil, pure monkey do evil. At number 6, we have Craney Landis. Landis was a graduate student at Minnesota University back in 1924. He asked his other graduate students to assist him in conducting an experiment in understanding if we humans all react similarly in different emotions. So, he painted specific lines on each individual's face and then got them to react to certain stimuli. At first, the experiment was harmless. He would record each of their faces as they listened to music, smell ammonia, read passages from the Bible, tell a lie, little things like that. But seeing no real results, he decided to up the ante. He then showed them pornographic images, then some horrendous photos of skin conditions, firing random gunshots to frighten his test subjects, getting them to stick their hand in a pail of slimy live frogs that had a live wire in the bottom, so when they touched the live wire, they would get an electric shock. Finally, the worst one of them all, decapitating a rat. He finally put a live rat in one hand and a knife in the other hand, and the test subject was then demanded to cut off the animal's head. If they refused, then he would do it in front of them. Sounds pretty scarring, if I do say so myself. Some started crying, others laughed in disbelief, and others got angry and swore at him. 2/3 ended up carrying out the dark death sentence, and the worst part of it all was that Landis even used a 13-year-old boy, who was actually a patient at the university. His findings in the end proved nothing and were quite different patient to patient. In the end, he just seemed like an evil madman scientist. Coming in at our halfway point at number 5, we have Johann Conrad Dippel. This scientist was born in Castle Frankenstein back in 1673, so it is only fitting that he was a mad and evil scientist. Dippel was a theologian, alchemist, and scientist who developed a popular dye called Prussian blue, and it's actually still used to this very day, which is very cool, but he is also known for the most controversial of things, such as mixing animal bones and hides together in a stew he named Dippel's Oil. Real original. He claimed that whoever drank this gross oil would then have an extended life, but he never said how long either, so I mean, whatever, dude. He loved dissecting animal bodies, and many believed he frequently dug up and stole human bodies and conducted weird experiments on them in his laboratory. Needless to say, this guy is one of the main inspirations for Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. But to the best of our knowledge, he never had the same luck as Dr. Frankenstein in the book. I'm guessing he tried to give that magical animal elixir to the corpses to see if he could bring them back to life, but sorry pal, no liquid on earth can do that. And oh, by the way, Miss Johnson would like her husband back, and her cat. At number 4, we have Duncan McDougall. McDougall was born in 1866 in Glasgow, Scotland, and later moved to Haverhill, Massachusetts. One of his most famous experiments he conducted was the 21 grams experiment, where he placed a dying patient on a cot that was on a scale and weighed the patient before and after the moment of death. His findings? That immediately after death, the deceased weighed 21 grams less, meaning that the soul was indeed a physical part to a human's body and that it did indeed leave once a person passed away. The work was absolutely destroyed in the scientific community, but defended in the religious community, as they deemed this was proof of a soul in a person's body. But what makes this guy evil? Well, he conducted the exact same experiment with dogs and noticed no weight change at all. He then made the statement that dogs don't have souls. Dogs don't have souls? You don't have a soul, you jerk! You say one more wrong thing about me, mutt, and I'll shove your pipes right up your kilt. Starting us off in our top 3, at number 3, we have Louis Julian West. For anyone out there that loves animals just as much as they love their fellow humans, this one is a scary one for you. West was quite the controversial scientist and researcher with ties to the top secret CIA project called Project MK Ultra. It was a project that used many US citizens, some of them even unwittingly, to use LSD and other drugs to see if these substances would have any mind control effects. West's studies are also believed to have major repercussions, such as a murder of a young victim, as well as the death of a full-grown elephant. The reason he felt the need to experiment on elephants, though, West knew that male elephants experienced fits, so he believed that he could induce an elephant rage with LSD. He gave the giant creature enough LSD to dose 3,000 people, and tragically, the elephant died. It was then that West concluded that elephants were sensitive to LSD. Yeah, do you think? For many reasons, this guy seems like an evil scientist. From human and animals' deaths related to the overdose of LSD, I think it's safe to say that we don't want to get anywhere near this guy. At number 2, we have Sidney Gottlieb. Sidney Gottlieb was the one who headed Project MKUltra and worked closely with West in our number 3 spot. Gottlieb was tasked with testing LSD in interrogation settings, but he didn't just test his work in interrogation settings or even in a lab. He actually brought his studies to the bar, where he would slip LSD into unsuspecting bar patrons' drinks. I don't think we need to question how unethical or wrong this one is, as it is clearly something that is messed up and sometimes still happens today, unfortunately. But this video is titled Evil Scientists in History Who Went Mad, and I think this is a pretty good proof that this guy was off his freaking rocker. And finally, coming in at our number 1 spot is most definitely the most evil scientist of them all. This is Josef Mengele. Josef was one of the most famous scientists at the most horrific concentration camp of World War II. A member of the Third Reich, Josef was a camp doctor. He was known to be one of the doctors to select the poor people who were to be sent to the gas chambers, and even went as far as volunteering for more and more shifts when he could. He also conducted many torturous and inhumane experiments on prisoners of all ages. After the war, Josef escaped to Argentina and was never captured by the authorities. He did, however, drown in 1979 in Brazil. While many on this list were half-jokingly evil and gone mad, I think anyone who takes pleasure in sending large numbers of people to their doom is most definitely evil, and I think mad just goes hand in hand with this one.
Starting us off at number 10 is death by water. One of the fundamentals of human life is that we need water to survive. Not only that, we're made up of approximately 60% water. We sweat water, we clean ourselves with water, and essentially rely on it to get through the day. So what happens when someone is allergic to water? Well, their life becomes about 100 times more complicated. One of the biggest mysteries in the medical field is an extremely rare condition called aquatogenic urticaria, where the skin breaks out into extremely painful hives or rash anytime it's exposed to water. As of a 2013 medical review, only 37 cases have been reported since 1964, most of which were female, as well as most reporting the condition only arose during or right after puberty began. What's insane about this condition is that not only are the afflicted often allergic to rainwater, snow, fresh water, and seawater, but many are allergic to their own sweat and tears, and even worse is that some people get rashes or welts on their lips and mouth area from just trying to drink enough water to stay alive. While there are a few theories out there about what could cause this peculiar nightmare condition, the underlying cause has never been confirmed and continues to perplex the medical community to no end. Coming in at number 9, stone tears. When Chandy was 15, she woke one morning feeling like there was something stuck in her eye. To her surprise, when she went to go and look in the mirror, there was a small stone in her eye, appearing to be coming from her tear duct. Ever since that day in July of 2021, Chadney and her family say that the young girl has cried stones out of her eyes several times a day, every day, and no one has any clue why, or frankly how, this could be happening. Allegedly, in just the 2 months since the ordeal began, Chadney collected nearly 70 stones that had fallen out of her eyes. The family lives in a small rural village in India, and they don't have much money to send her to specialists, but have posted videos online to try and get help for their daughter. According to the doctors that weigh in, there is no known existing condition that could be associated with this, so it's definitely disturbing, especially considering that from what anyone can tell, nothing seems to be out of the ordinary in her actual eyes. Now, truth be told, there are some doctors out there who think it could be a hoax, but nothing has been confirmed, and honestly, no one really knows what is going on. Next up at number 8, the Iceman. You know how there are people out there who like to do a morning cold plunge? Well, one man, Wim Hof, nicknamed the Iceman, seems to have taken that to a whole new level. Born in the Netherlands in 1959, Hof is, as it seems, immune to freezing temperatures. At the age of 17, Hof said he had a sudden impulse to strip down and jump into a half-frozen canal, and it's not that he felt nothing, but he was able to withstand it for far longer than should have made any sense. This turned him into developing what he calls the Wim Hof method, which he says combines frequent exposure to cold paired with special breathing techniques along with yoga and meditation. In fact, Hof set the Guinness World Record for prolonged full body contact with ice and for swimming under ice in 2000. Then in 2012, curious about if it really was all some breathing technique or if he was some kind of medical marvel, researchers in the Netherlands examined samples of Hoff's blood and determined that he was somehow able to manipulate his immune system at will, essentially stopping his body from going into a stress response due to the temperature. Now, sure, does his deep breathing help regulate the body? Of course, but Hoff would have you believe it's all in the technique. However, there have been several tragic deaths from people attempting his method and subsequently freezing themselves to death, so maybe there is a little more to the story. Coming in at number 7, a human chimera. Due to the nature of how lives are brought into this world, if there's one thing that is never up for debate, it's generally the biological mother of a person. However, one woman named Karen Keegan found herself in the most bizarre and baffling situation. In 2002, Karen was in need of a second kidney transplant after her first one failed, so she underwent genetic testing with her family to see if any of them would be a match and able to donate her. So imagine Karen and her doctor's surprise when the test suggested that genetically, while all her children were siblings, she was not the biological mother of 2 of the 3 children she brought into the world. Her doctor assumed this had to be a mistake, and so they tested once more, but strangely, the results were the same. As it turns out, Karen was a chimera, which is a person composed of 2 genetically distinct cellular lines. Essentially, it turns out that the DNA in her blood was different from the DNA in her ovaries, a phenomenon that her doctor hypothesized came from 2 eggs that were fertilized very early on and fused together when Karen was a fetus in her own mother. Okay, so maybe this one isn't a totally unsolved medical mystery, but you have to admit it's pretty wild. Next up at number 6, foreign accent syndrome. Imagine waking up one morning and suddenly talking in a completely different accent than you have your entire life. While some people might think that you're doing a bit, believe it or not, there is an actual mystery called foreign accent syndrome, or FAS, where the very thing can happen. Most famously was the case in 1941 when a Norwegian woman suffered a traumatic brain injury during an air raid and suddenly and uncontrollably began speaking with a strong German accent. But others include an American woman who suddenly spoke in a mixture of Australian, Irish, and British after a car accident, as well as an Australian woman who suddenly spoke with a French accent after going to sleep with a headache. For a while, it was regarded as a psychological disorder. However, it is now associated as more of a neurological one, usually onset by head trauma or a stroke. But the part that scientists have not been able to wrap their brains around is how on earth people can seemingly speak in an accent they have never been exposed to. When learning to speak, your natural accent is a result of sound patterns you unconsciously learn, otherwise known as the phonetic system. When you are young, accents can shift as you become exposed to new speech patterns, but by the time you reach your teen years, your phonetic system is pretty much locked in. But FAS somehow affects the entire patterning of your phonetic system and continues to perplex doctors all over the world. Next up at number 5, no appetite. Sometimes when you're feeling under the weather or on certain medication, it's not uncommon to find that your appetite has gone down. However, anyone who has ever met a teenager can attest that of all the people, they are usually the last to lose their appetite. But back in 2013, a 12-year-old named Landon Jones from Iowa baffled doctors after he suddenly woke up one morning feeling faint and with a horrible cough. His parents wasted no time immediately rushing him to the hospital, where it was discovered he had an infection in his left lung, and while the infection was promptly treated, the worst of it was yet to come. For whatever reason, ever since that day, Landon has never had any kind of appetite or thirst. The boy rapidly started losing weight, going from 104 pounds to just 68 right before his parents' eyes, all seemingly due to the fact that he never felt a hunger or thirst cue. As he continued losing weight, his parents were growing more and more worried about their son's strange condition. But no matter what doctor they took him to, they could never get an answer as to what was happening to him. Landon was given countless brain scans, psych evals, medical evals, and tested to make sure he didn't have an eating disorder, but nothing was providing them with an answer. Some doctors have wondered if he suffers from a brain dysfunction in the hypothalamus, the part that controls hunger and thirst, but his case remains unsolved. Next up at number 4, Syndrome X. Brooks. When Brooke Greenberg was born in 1993, she weighed a mere 4 pounds and had a hip dislocation. Luckily, the hip issue was fixed through a surgery, and although 4 pounds is generally revered as small for a newborn, she was premature and nothing else seemed off, so from what doctors could see, she appeared to be perfectly healthy. However, things started becoming mysterious around the time she was 4 or 5 years old, as her parents and doctors noticed that Brooke appeared to have stopped growing. As the years went by, Brooke remained virtually unaged, a phenomenon that confused every single medical professional that her family seeked out. By the age of 20, she still looked the same as she had when she was 4 years old, measuring less than 3 feet tall and weighing only about 16 pounds. And it wasn't only her appearance that had stopped progressing. Brooke communicated as an infant would, giggling when happy, crying when sad, and continued to wear diapers. Interestingly, the only thing that continued to grow as normal were Brooke's hair and nails. The family took her to endless specialists over the years looking for answers to their daughter's condition, but each one was just as perplexed as the next. Some simply said not to worry and that she would catch up, while others prescribed growth hormones, but nothing ever seemed to help their daughter grow. Doctors were completely stumped by this poor girl's condition, calling it Syndrome X, and ever since her death at the age of 20 in 2013, specialists have yet to come up with an explanation. Coming in at number 3, eyes shut. When Natalie Adler was 17, she awoke one morning to find that her eyelids were mysteriously swollen. While this was definitely alarming to Natalie, she didn't initially think much of it. Maybe it was allergies or something along those lines. However, next thing she knew, the condition was only getting worse. Her eyes started to become so swollen that she eventually wasn't able to open them up at all. Even stranger was that it began developing into an inexplicable cycle where they would spasm shut for 3 days, and then they would open for 3 days, and it did that for 13 years. By the time she was 30, doctors were still at a loss for what was causing her rare condition. A condition that is so rare, in fact, that it doesn't even have a name. And even after hundreds of tests, they are no closer to understanding her condition. Over the years, Natalie has undergone several surgeries, none of which have proved successful, however said that she does get Botox injections to help keep her eyes partially open, although she continues to suffer from random bouts of blindness each month. Although doctors have yet to come any closer on how to cure her condition, she continues to see eye specialists, hoping that one day her medical mystery will be solved. Coming in at number 2, twins. There are lots of different kinds of perplexing conditions that have popped up in the medical world over the years, but one of the wildest has to be the story of Sanju Bhagat. Most of his life, Sanju had been incredibly self-conscious about his large stomach, which he described as once being so big he appeared to be 9 months pregnant. What's even more shocking is that for whatever reason, he never received any kind of medical attention for his protruding belly. That was until one day in 1999 when Sanju began to experience shortness of breath and was rushed to the hospital. When he got there, the doctors assumed Sanju had a large tumor in his abdomen and rushed him into the operating room to remove it. However, instead of an enormous tumor they expected, they could not believe their eyes when they opened him up and found the remains of a half-formed twin that had been living inside of him the last 36 years. The condition, called fetus in fetu, is incredibly rare, having only been documented 90 times in medical literature throughout history. As it turns out, when Sanju had been in the womb, his twin had become trapped inside and essentially became a parasite. Most that suffer this condition do not live long, often not even surviving inside their own mother, so doctors were completely flabbergasted and unable to explain how this man had lived 36 years with the twin inside of him. And last up today in our number 1 spot, no pain. While most of the time we try to avoid it since you know it hurts and it isn't fun, knowing that you are in pain is actually really important because it helps you keep from getting more hurt. Like when you burn your arm on the 400-degree oven rack and it hurts like hell, so you immediately move your arm away. Or maybe you break your ankle and it obviously hurts, so you stop walking, thus hopefully stopping you from making it even worse. So with that in mind, imagine a life where nothing was telling you you were in pain. Well, that's exactly what Gabby Gingras has had to deal with her whole life. Now 23, Gabby has never felt a semblance of pain her whole life. As a little one, her parents said she would chew her hands until they looked like raw meat, but would never cry, and it was then that they knew something was not right. Then a few years later, Gabby scratched herself blind in one eye and had to wear goggles to sleep until she was old enough to understand her condition. As a kid, she routinely, unwittingly injured herself, once knocking out all of her teeth, another time getting second-degree burns from standing too close to a radiator, and even broke her own jaw but had no idea for several weeks. Even seemingly small things like weather conditions don't faze her. She has to be reminded to wear a coat in the winter so she doesn't get frostbite, or stand in the shade in the summer, as she's completely unaware of how to gauge temperature. Her condition is called hereditary sensory autonomic neuropathy, or HSAN, and while there is no cure, and the cause of the condition remains a big question mark to medical professionals, with proper support and learning from an intellectual perspective what can be dangerous, most people can thankfully live a totally normal life.
Number 10, the Black Plague. Speaks for itself, really. I mean, I would still take COVID over this any day, but like, The Black Plague was a wave of death and disease that struck fear into any who encountered it. Not only was the time period incredibly ill-equipped to handle it, a miracle we survived. What with basically no knowledge of hygiene whatsoever, it was a painful ordeal. Blood and pus-filled boils would emerge, followed by fever, chills, vomiting, violent number 2s, and aches and pains, which would inevitably end up in death. People who were perfectly healthy when they went to bed might have ended up dead the next morning. It was that fast. People did everything they could to avoid the sick. Doctors refused to see patients if they did. Their procedures were dangerous and unsanitary. I think what scares me the most about this is the lack of understanding around the disease, or disease in general. No one had any idea what was causing it, and if you thought isolation was bad, imagine doing that without telephones, iPads, social media, or Skype. You would have no idea what was going on with your family. So yeah, definitely the Black Plague. It's up there. Number 9, the King James witch hunts. Of course, we have to add some more witch hunts to this list because there were many, and this time they weren't hanged, they were burned at the stake. Not fun. And this by mere scale was much worse than the Salem witch trials. For some reason, King James I of England had something against women. Oh, sorry, I meant witches. 85% of the people accused were women. King James believed that he and his Danish bride had been specifically targeted by witches after encountering a dangerous storm while trying to cross the North Sea, which, by the way, is notoriously bad to cross anyways. He believed the storm was conjured, and the first he accused was Gayless Duncan. Her employer David Seaton forced a confession out of her through torment, after which she named several accomplices. Duncan retracted her confession, but it was too late. The witch trials began, and in 1591 Agnes Sampson confessed that 200 witches sailed to the church of North Berwick on Halloween night in 1590. There the devil preached to them and they began to plot the king's destruction. The convicted witches were burned at the stake, a much more terrifying way to die than by hanging, even though that's still bad, and over 100 were implicated, with many being executed. Because how do you disprove something that's not real? Number 8, zombies. A real life zombie apocalypse, anyone? For me, no thank you. I'm not nearly as scared of witches as I probably should be, but I definitely don't want to be anywhere near a zombie movie, unless Simon Pegg and Nick Frost are involved, because I love them. I would sell my soul for that. While many of us like to romanticize the Renaissance, it actually had a mini zombie infestation, specifically in Italy, and a major outbreak of syphilis broke out in 1494, which is probably one of the most horrific STDs known to mankind. If untreated, it can literally eat your face off. In the mid-15th to 16th century, Italy was a field of war, which most likely led to the infection, with all the comings and goings of travelers and the affairs. They had awful ways of treating it, many of which involved the use of hot pokers in places I can't nor want to mention. I'm not sure what terrifies me more, the disease or the medical care used to treat it. It affected most of the nobility, especially those in the military, who would often seek out extramarital affairs. The son of Pope Alexander VI is one famous example. Cesare Borgia had to wear a leather mask to hide the disfigurement from the disease. But if you couldn't hide behind the wealth, then you were left wandering the streets in a terrifying half-melted melted, feverish state. Number 7. Pompeii. A massive world-ending explosion, suffocating thousands and covering their corpses with lava sound great to anyone? No, me neither. The fact that people still live in and around Pompeii astounds me. You know it could happen again, right? Right around lunchtime on August 24th, 79 CE, a huge earth-shattering eruption blasted volcanic debris all over the city of Pompeii. Over the next few days, clouds of blistering hot gases swarmed the city, buildings were destroyed, the population was either crushed or suffocated. The city was literally covered in ash and stone for centuries until it was finally unearthed in the 1700s. I visited the city, and the stone corpses frozen in whatever position they were in when they died is haunting, to say the least. Absolutely terrifying. Mount Vesuvius, the volcano mentioned, sits above a 154-mile-deep pit of magma, and scientists think it's overdue for an eruption. So yes, I would take the Salem witch trials over that any day. Number 6. Jack the Ripper. An unknown killer preying on London, committing horrendous and brutal acts? Yeah, no thanks. I don't even like doing lists about the serial individuals we have mentioned. I would take a witch over Ted Bundy or Ed Gein any day. Because there's nothing in question there. They are real. Witches? Don't know. But Jack the Ripper remains one of the most terrifying serial killings of history and remains unsolved. In the East End of London in 1888, 5 gruesome murders took place in Whitechapel. Not only were their lives taken, but their corpses were mutilated in nightmarish ways. The crimes had a huge impact on society as a whole up until that point. Crimes such as that had never been so heavily in the press. The name Jack the Ripper became coined after a haunting letter sent to the London news agency was signed by Jack. This was just one of the letters he sent, one being accompanied by a kidney preserved in wine. Number 5. Holodomor. The Holodomor was the first genocide that was meticulously planned out in order to cause the most suffering. The withholding of food was used as a weapon. Between 1932 to 1933, millions of Ukrainians were killed by a man-made famine engineered by Joseph Stalin. Rural farmers made up of 80% of Ukraine's population, and they were the primary ones hit. After World War I and the fall of the Russian monarchy, Ukraine established the Independent Ukrainian People's Republic in January 1918. They fought the Bolshevik army for 3 years but eventually fell and was forced to be a part of the Soviet Union. Stalin's vendetta against Ukrainian farmers began when their unrest resulted in a new economic policy that gave them more freedom. Stalin didn't like that. When Stalin at last established his stronghold, he decided to destroy Ukrainian peasantry. Through widespread intimidation, arrests, imprisonments, he took out church leaders, Ukrainian intellects, party functionaries, and basically anyone who opposed him. Then in August 1932, he decreed that if anyone, even a child, was caught taking produce from a collected field, they could be shot or imprisoned. He sealed the borders so no one could leave, and they were all forced to starve to death. And finally, it ended in 1933 when Stalin essentially got what he wanted. Number 4. The Spanish Inquisition. Ah yes, the classic Monty Python joke. But if it is a joke, then why is it on here? Well, good friends, that's because it was terrifying. And we are talking about witch trials, and this is kind of like that. Nobody knows exactly how many people died during this time, but it's estimated to be anywhere from 30,000 to 300,000. Big jump. Basically, it was a purge of non-believers by the Vatican, especially those in the Jewish community. Tomás de Torquemada was one such evil man during the event who played the role as Grand Inquisitor for a time. If you weren't Catholic, you were given 2 choices. 1, convert, or 2, be burned at the stake for heresy. There was really no in between. He, along with many others, used cruel measures of torments, and even worse, do you want to know how long this lasted? Yes. Nope, not 10 years, not 15, 350 years. Number 3, residential schools. Yeah, this one's rough. You may have heard a lot about residential schools recently, as over 1,000 bodies and unmarked graves have been found across Canada, and there's bound to be more. Residential schools were government and church-sponsored religious schools designed to assimilate Indigenous children to a Euro-Canadian culture. They tore children away from their families, and over 150,000 First Nation, Inuit, and Métis children attended the schools. More than 38,000 Indigenous people experienced horrendous abuse of both a physical and depraved nature at the hands of residential school teachers and priests. Former students have testified that people died from disease, accidents, fires during attempts to escape, or killed to cover up nefarious affairs. When family members died, mothers and fathers were never even told where they were buried. The residential school period of Canadian history is terrifying, and for a while wasn't really talked about. I didn't learn about them until I came to university, and then recalled a story I was told of how nuns used to make molasses candies and put them on school desks to encourage Indigenous children. I wasn't told about anything else. The reality wasn't nearly as pretty. The last school closed as recently as 1996, and so far 1,300 suspected unmarked graves have been found through radar technology, with dozens more schools to be left searched. Number 2, Khmer Rouge. Orchestrated by Cambodian leader Pol Pot, the Khmer Rouge was one of the most horrific points in history. Much worse than the Salem witch trials. It's like, that's nothing compared to this. During 1975 to 79, the totalitarian leader caused the death of over 2 million people through forced labor, starvation, disease, torment, persecution, and blatant execution. Pot and his radical communist society was trying to purify society in order to make capitalism and other Western ideologies disappear. I can't even begin to imagine how terrifying this would be to live through. This is the real 1984. He cut off all media outlets along with communication with embassies, education was stopped, healthcare was eliminated. He basically locked Cambodia off from the rest of the world. He knew that anyone with intellect would threaten his regime, so he eliminated anyone who symbolized that, even people who wore glasses. There was the police, doctors, lawyers, teachers, ex-soldiers along with their families. He took all of them out. He forced everyone into what became known as the killing fields and forced them to work off of only 180 grams of rice a day. It took years for his peers to finally have enough of him and lock Pot away under house arrest, but even then he was never really truly punished. Khmer Rouge was finally overthrown by invading Vietnamese troops in 1979, but it was only until the 1990s to the early 2000s, after Pot died, that prosecutions began.
Starting off this countdown, we have Shiro Ishi. Shiro Ishi was a microbiologist and the Lieutenant General of Unit 731. Unit 731 was a biological warfare unit during the Second Japanese War. Well, in 1936, Ishi built a huge compound where he would perform a number of disturbing experiments, including cutting pregnant women open to study them. These women were often impregnated by Ishi's doctors. Another experiment consisted of having someone's limbs amputated and then reattaching them to other parts of their body. Others had parts of their bodies frozen and then thawed, so he could study what would happen if you didn't treat gangrene. Trust me though, it gets worse. Other prisoners were his test subjects for grenades and flamethrowers, or he would inject others with diseases to study their effects. Everything he did was horrific, and he was sadistic. He loved torturing people and running disturbing experiments on them. In our 9th spot today, we have Sidney Gottlieb. Sidney was an American military psychiatrist that worked with the CIA during the Cold War. This guy was the head of the MK Ultra projects. Basically, they were super unethical experiments where people were injected with high levels of LSD. Others were subjected to electrical shocks, or were left in isolation, or injected with other chemicals. In fact, he went around and would drop LSD into innocent people's drinks and then observe the effects. Also, this dude was obsessed with poison. He wanted to poison any and everything. For example, he tried to kill Fidel Castro with a poisoned cigar, a poisoned wetsuit, and a poisoned fountain pen. Thankfully, people were like, no, Sidney, we're not doing that. Like, this dude just wanted to watch people either die, trip out, or suffer. Coming in at number 8, we have William Buckland. This dude, well, he was interesting. He was a geologist and paleontologist, but had a weird hobby he would partake in, which was eating things he shouldn't be eating. He ate things including roasted hedgehog, puppies, bat urine, ostriches, you get it, okay? That's not all. Apparently, he ate the shrunken heart of King Louis XIV. Yeah, you heard me. This dude, for some reason, ate a nasty old dead person's heart. Eating all of this weird stuff was apparently part of his experiments. Which was what? Seeing what weird thing would taste the best? I don't know what was going on here. Moving on, at number 7, we have Sergei Bryukhanko. I'm so sorry, I know I already butchered his last name. Sergei was a Soviet scientist. He started off on the right track, kinda. He created a machine used to help perform the first Soviet open heart surgery, and then he spiraled into madness. He started to use this machine to try and do some messed up procedures, like take vital organs out of dogs. He killed hundreds of dogs with these operations. Basically, he would cut open the dogs, take out the organs and hook them up to this machine to see if he could keep them alive outside of the body. His most famous and messed up experiment was called the dog's head, where he severed a dog's head and connected it to one of his machines, which then brought the head back to life, just the head. It even responded to being given a treat. It ate it, and then it fell right out, because you understand. Of course, it died not too long after. Moving on, at number 6, we have Stubbins Firth. If you guys are eating or drinking anything right now, I suggest you stop. This one is gonna make you sick to your stomach. Basically, in the 19th century, training doctor Stubbins Firth decided to do experiments on yellow fever. This was to show that it wasn't contagious, so he would experiment on himself. He would literally smear bodily fluids from patients with yellow fever all over his body. That's not the gross part, believe me. He even took their vomit and drank it, all in the name of science. Anyways, the real reason why he didn't contract it was because all the patients were in the final stage of yellow fever. By then, they weren't contagious anymore. Like, there has to be something wrong with you if you're going around drinking vomit. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Andrew Ure. This dude conducted a number of experiments on corpses. This involved taking dead people into the public and then shocking their body so that it would move. He then would control the dead body with these electrical probes. By doing so, he could cause the deceased eyes to open, their arms to move, and even change their facial expressions. He basically was a puppeteer for real dead people. Just let that sink in. Moving on, at number 4, we have Johann Conrad Dippel. This guy is said to be the inspiration for the book turned movie Frankenstein. First off, he was literally born at Castle Frankenstein, so there's that. And then he conducted a number of gruesome procedures on alive people and cadavers. In fact, legend goes that he once tried to transfer one cadaver's soul into another cadaver with the use of a funnel hose and lubricant. I'm sure you can imagine how that went. His main goal, though, was to achieve immortality. In fact, he got way too fixated on this and he ended up killing himself. Basically, in 1734, he was trying to find an elixir to make him live forever, and then he ended up creating a toxic substance, drinking it, and RIP. Coming in at number 2, we have Harry Harlow, aka the monkey torturer. Harry Harlow decided to see how strong a baby's connection is with their mother. For these experiments, he used baby monkeys and their moms. Here's the thing, he had this disturbing machine that would force monkeys to mate, and then he would basically torture the baby monkeys. His most controversial experiment was a device he called the Pit of Despair. Basically, he would place the newborn monkey in a small isolated chamber for periods up to a year. They had no contact with any living creature whatsoever. The monkeys ended up having serious problems that they could never grow out of. On a number of occasions, he said, and I quote, "To be honest, I don't even know why I'm doing this." Another one of his famous quotes would be, and I quote, "You mean you don't like being tortured? Fascinating." This dude was sick. And in the end, he had no real findings. He said, and I quote, "What is love? Well, you know that feeling you get when you've been locked in a tiny dark space alone for a year? It's the opposite of that." Like, what the actual heck? I could have even told you that. He just wanted an excuse to torture animals.